Peter Lee, and this is Newsbud's China Watch. This week, China gets a bullseye on its back for North Korea. T-Rex roars and maybe snores in Asia. Aircraft carrier madness in the South China Sea. And gators. Hopefully by the time this episode of China Watch airs on March 22nd, a nuclear war will not have broken out over the Korean peninsula. We don't want Rex Tillerson to lose any sleep. Rex Tillerson, sometimes known as T-Rex, sometimes known as America's Stealth Secretary of State, visited Japan, South Korea, and China amid much jockeying over the North Korean nuclear issue. His trip was marked by Dinnergate, some diplomatic awkwardness over the fact that Tillerson did not break bread with his South Korean counterparts. The Korean Herald, citing Seoul officials, stated the U.S. side opted not to have a meal together, citing the secretary's fatigue. Tillerson fired back, stating, "They never invited us for dinner. Then at the last minute they realized that optically it wasn't playing very well in public for them, so they put out a statement that we didn't have dinner because I was tired." For some context, Tillerson had apparently had a 2.5-hour meeting and dinner with Japan's Foreign Minister Kishida, but only a 1-hour meeting and no dinner with the South Korean Foreign Minister. It is quite possible, as Tillerson stated, dinner was never on the agenda, and ROK diplomats were embarrassed by the seemingly perfunctory nature of Tillerson's visit to South Korea compared to Japan and tried to make up for it at the last minute. And maybe Tillerson was not interested in stroking the caretaker South Korean government, which is just holding things together between the impeachment of President Park and the elections in May, and when anxious ROK officials tried at the last minute to achieve meeting plus dinner parity with Japan, Tillerson told them to F off. And he might have been tired. So there's that. Tillerson managed to have a busy, newsworthy visit, dishing out the tough talk to North Korea in Japan and South Korea, and getting his picture taken at the 38th parallel by a North Korean soldier. Tillerson also stuck it to the Obama administration, characterizing North Korean diplomacy to date as a failure. The policy of strategic patience, of course, is the signature Obama strategy for North Korea. This sort of rhetoric implies something big is in the works, because I doubt Tillerson is advertising 20 years of failed approaches so he can carry on with the 21st year of failed approaches. Trump wants a win on North Korea to gain some political traction for his flailing administration and stick it to both the Obama administration and the phantom Hillary Clinton administration that, at least in the minds of never-Trump partisans, is the only team capable of running the United States. So, I think Tillerson was in Asia trying to nudge the Korean issue toward a resolution by stating that this time the United States is really, really serious about either denuclearizing North Korea by force or negotiating some kind of deal. Of course, if the U.S. really wants to attack North Korea, now's the time to do it, with everybody assuming nothing's going to happen until Xi Jinping visits the United States and South Korea elects a new president. But let's be optimistic and assume that the Trump administration is talking tough to encourage Kim Jong-un to reach for the deal. Carrots and sticks, you know. An indication that the U.S. is looking at some kind of deal with North Korea was Tillerson's hint that a conceivable future for South Korea and Japan involves developing their own nuclear deterrence, which would be a very strong possibility if some sort of deal is struck that is not based on North Korea preemptively and immediately giving up its own nuclear deterrent. As Tillerson put it, so we do think it's important that everyone in the region has a clear understanding that circumstances could evolve to the point that for mutual deterrence reasons, we might have to consider that. Tillerson gamely made his "we come in peace" pitch to Kim Jong-un, but as the U.S. press now belatedly admits, the U.S. murdering Muammar Gaddafi after he gave up his WMD programs pretty much makes voluntary denuclearization by the DPRK as a first step close to impossible. Add to that, the U.S. and ROK conducted a North Korea invasion exercise with 250,000 troops last week, moved a SEAL 6 assassination team to South Korea, though denied by the Department of Defense, parked an aircraft carrier at Busan, and stations weapon-capable drones in the ROK. This didn't exactly feed the Kim Jong-un has nothing to worry about and should give up his nukes narrative. Well, nobody really wants a war on the Korean Peninsula, But North Korea is not going to denuclearize anytime soon. So, what could negotiations actually accomplish? Potentially the most interesting and encouraging sign that Team Trump has higher ambitions for Korea than just muddling along was Tillerson's use of one word. That word was win, and Tillerson said it twice in his statement before meeting Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing on March 18th. Tillerson said, win-win. Or as he put it, the US and China are always searching for win-win solutions. Important statement because it's not true. During the Obama-Clinton years, win-win was exactly what the United States didn't pursue. Win-win is the favorite PRC diplomatic formulation. It is the opposite of zero-sum, a relationship in which one side wins and the other side loses. Win cancels out loss equals zero. With win-win, everybody's a winner. The PRC idea of win-win diplomacy was that the U.S. would respect China's core interests, and in return China would help out with things like Iran, North Korea, climate change, and whatnot. Trouble is, as a practical matter, most of China's core interests impinge on the values and interests of the United States and its friends and allies in the region. Places like the South China Sea, where the PRC is jostling with a core U.S. ally, the Philippines, and an important potential partner, Vietnam. The Clinton State Department and the Obama administration rejected the PRC proposition. There wasn't going to be any win-win horse trading. And they did it in a way that was, to me at least, a classic piece of overreach by challenging the idea that China had legitimate security and strategic interests even in Asia that the U.S. should respect. Hillary Clinton declared that this would be America's Pacific century, not China's, and she seemed to declare that the U.S. had more of a right to be in Asia than China because the U.S. was the glue that held together the principled international order that was the basis of peace and prosperity in the region. It was China's job, according to the U.S., to show that it deserved a place in the principled international order by trying to meet the high international standards that the United States had committed itself to upholding and enforcing for trade, human rights, internet freedom, freedom of navigation, and so on. We didn't make deals with China. We kicked China in the ass and demanded they improve their performance. Needless to say, China failed at every turn. So, China under Xi Jinping just gave up. More accurately, it embarked on a policy of defying the United States and challenging its claim that the United States was the essential and effective protector of the principled international order. The key event? Chinese defiance of the law of the sea judgment negating the PRC 9- line in the South China Sea. Not only did China refuse to accept this U.S.-backed international norm, it successfully weaned away the key claimant, the Philippines, from the U.S. position. To be honest, the U.S. position was becoming harder and harder to sustain with the growth in Chinese economic and military power and its global assertiveness. Barring a collapse by China, sooner or later the day would come when Chinese power and influence in Asia surpassed that of the United States. With Trump, that day is coming sooner rather than later. And in fact, according to the State Department, the pivot to Asia is over. By abandoning the Trans-Pacific Partnership and switching to bilateral trade deals, Trump knocked a key prop out from under the argument that America's core mission is upholding the principled international order. Foreign policy a la Trump looks a lot more like the U.S. advancing its national interest flexibly and opportunistically. China policy for Trump might turn out to be a series of deals, and China under Xi Jinping, which shares with Trump a common love for deals and a hatred for all things Hillary Clinton, is happy to move on to what's called transactional diplomacy. Or, as the Chinese and now Rex Tillerson put it, win-win. That not-so-faint screaming sound you hear? That's Obama-Clinton pivoteers vocally appalled when Tillerson made his win-win statement and realizing that everything in the signature Trump motto is on the table. Interests of allies, human rights, free trade, all the things that made pivoteers feel they had the moral high ground against China. Eli Ratner, the ex-advisor to Joe Biden, who keeps the pivot flag flying, told the Washington Post, Tillerson's rhetoric portends U.S. decline in accommodation. which will only encourage Chinese assertiveness and raise doubts in the region about the future of U.S. commitment and leadership in Asia. For Tillerson to not only abandon the pivot, but adopt the Chinese win-win formula for his trip to Asia is a pretty major tell that the Trump administration wants to get, you guessed it, a win on North Korea, and wants to entice the PRC to help make it happen. As to what the deal might entail, well, need I say it again? Everything is on the table. Maybe even TAD, especially since the ROK is flat on its back politically, and there's a good chance the new president may turn out to be a peacenik who doesn't like TAD anyway. Potential scenario? Pull TAD out of the ROK in return for Chinese help in pressuring a deal from Kim Jong-un. Put TAD back in if the deal goes sour. You can see how this might go. Bigger picture, the key sticking point, as everyone realizes, is that North Korea will not surrender its nuclear deterrent as a precondition or initial step for any deal. If the negotiation track is to go ahead, some finessing is in order. And that, I think, means China. Maybe North Korea will agree to some face-saving deal where it promises to give up its nukes somewhere down the road, and the PRC is guarantor of that deal. If North Korea reneges, instead of Kim Jong-un, over whom the U.S. has virtually zero leverage, getting a consequence, Xi Jinping gets a consequence instead. It makes deal-making sense, especially in Trump land, to get China, which has enormous exposure to U.S. retaliation, on the hook for a North Korea deal. China hawks in the U.S. have been talking about threatening to ban Chinese banks from the U.S. financial system as part of a Korea strategy for a decade. Maybe now's the time. As the Donald Trump Twitter machine put it, China has been taking massive amounts of money and wealth from the U.S. in totally one-sided trade, but wouldn't help with North Korea. Nice. Peace with North Korea is possible, but maybe not in a way Obama and Clinton Asia hands might expect or like. Speaking of places to retaliate against China, there's everybody's favorite flashpoint, the South China Sea. Last week I said if it looks like Duterte's problems might escalate to the point he'll be forced from office and a pro-U.S. regime takes over, the PRC might dust off its plans for island building on the Scarborough Shoal. Well, this week things got a bit hotter for Duterte as the opposition threatened him with impeachment and Duterte's own people threatened his own vice president with impeachment for criticizing his drug war to the UN. In the middle of all this, a local Chinese official was quoted in a Chinese newspaper to the effect that the PRC was planning preparatory work for building an environmental monitoring station on Scarborough Shoal. This caused intense excitement and drawing of red and purple circles by the think tank quadrant, showing how this would inevitably lead to the conversion of the South China Sea into, well, China's Southern Sea, without, it seems, many good suggestions about what to do about it. As I pointed out last week, international law can't do much to prevent China from building on a territorial feature it occupies. As soon as Reuters publicized the report, it was scrubbed from the Chinese website. Calculated warning or goof? I don't know. But built or unbuilt, China intends to stay on the Scarborough Shoal for good. And the United States is determined to make China pay for that, somehow. The Pentagon, for its part, is going to do its best to transform the South China Sea into an international showcase for aircraft carriers over the next few years. The Carl Vinson completed its patrols in the South China Sea and just arrived in South Korea. Unofficially so far, in May of this year, Japan will send its aircraft carrier, the Izumo, into the South China Sea and onward to naval exercises with the U.S. in the Indian Ocean. Also in May, France will reportedly send a Mistral amphibious assault vessel to the Pacific, carrying Japanese and U.S. personnel and British helicopters and, quote, sending a message to China. Business Insider got the message, albeit in somewhat garbled form, telling its readers that France was going to be flexing its muscles in the South China Sea. France is actually going to be flexing its muscles around Tinian Island, which is in the Marianas, a good 1,500 miles away from the South China Sea. And the UK has promised to sail its new aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth, through the South China Sea in 2020 after they finished building it. The United States' 11th aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, will enter service sometime this year. The 12th carrier, the John F. Kennedy, will enter service in 2020 if all goes well. It is a U.S. law that America must have at least 11 aircraft carriers. I did not know that. They'll need some place to sail. Fortunately, there's enough room in the South China Sea. How much this will change Chinese behavior remains to be seen. If and when an aggressively pro-U.S. administration returns to the Philippines and needs the help of the world's aircraft carriers to face down China, I think the confrontation might come not at Scarborough Shoal, but at the aptly named Mischief Reef. Mischief Reef, you see, was originally an underwater feature, not an elevation above water at high tide. So, it falls under the jurisdiction of the law of the sea, and according to the Arbitration Commission, it falls inside the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. I believe Mischief Reef is the only Chinese man-made island that is A, not a territorial feature, and B, lies inside the Philippine EEZ. According to the law of the sea, therefore, developing or exploiting Mischief Reef in any way is the sole right of the Philippines, and China's man-made island is simply an illegal structure inside the Philippine EEZ. The Philippines can either demand China vacate it or pay rent for it, or the Philippines might try to evict China, in which case it might be a good idea to have half a dozen friendly aircraft carriers hanging around. I think we'll be hearing more about Mischief Reef once Duterte's out of office, maybe even before. Finally, moving beyond the South China Sea and thinking big, any naval attack against the Chinese mainland should probably be launched between October and March, because that's the Chinese alligator hibernation season. China's strategic alligator population is managed by the Anhui Yangtze Alligator Reserve in Shenzhen City. Every fall, they move 13,000 alligators into hibernation buildings, where the gators spend the cold months basically sitting around. Now things have warmed up enough so the alligators can be relocated to their outdoor ponds and fed mussels and snails to get them frisky and feisty and improve their hunting skills. Here's a look. Watch your fingers. That's all for this week. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, go to newsbud.com, where you'll find exclusive content available only to the Newsbud community. I'm Peter Lee for Newsbud's China Watch.
For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.